The Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to carrylutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. And if you're worrying about gold confiscation, if you're wondering what the next step is between Iran and the U.S. and when it's going to take place, my next guest, a weekly regular, Ranting Andy Hoffman, is on to talk about that and a lot more. Andy, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me. And the intriguing introduction, as if I know it's going to happen in Iran.
Well, I thought you worked for the company.
Well, they're making it pretty obvious what they're doing, the company. So,
yeah, they've been working on this for a while. This thing is nothing is left to chance. I think it was FDR who said there's no coincidences in politics, and there's certainly trouble brewing here. You know what they're up to, and it just gets more and more obvious by the day, right?
Yeah, on Friday afternoon, the SWIFT system, that's the International Water Service, kowtowed to Obama and is kicking Iran off. And as a result, Iran this weekend said they're no longer selling oil to Britain or France. And on top of that, they were docking some of their ships in Syria this weekend, which has been embargoed by the U.S. So I'm very nervous about what's going to happen here. I see oil prices hitting new highs in Brent crude today and getting close to the highs from many years ago in West Texas. And it's going to be a crazy election year.
Yeah, you're right about everything they're doing, because basically when you knock a country off of SWIFT, you knock them out of the modern era. They can't conduct any of their international finance electronically anymore. It all has to be direct to each country, barter operations effectively. I mean, you've knocked them off the financial grid is what you've done. And if that doesn't set those guys off, I mean, I don't think the Iranians are wrapped too tight anyway in a lot of respects. I mean, we've done stuff to them, and, the U.S. definitely does not have clean hands on this one. However, these guys are fanatical in a lot of respects, not just the way they've been portrayed by the media, and who knows what they're going to do, right? Well,
they're a giant country with a population of 75 million. They have a big army. They may or may not have nuclear weapons, and more importantly, they have allies. And the Chinese and Russians and Indians and pretty much all their neighbors except Israel are all on their side. So, and unlike Iraq, which was like a fiefdom, where Saddam Hussein was completely unreligious type, he just was kind of a warlord. Here you have a united nation of large size with a demagogic leader who hates America, and it makes me very nervous. So,
yeah, well, this thing's been brewing for a long time, and it has an air of inevitability about it, and it's kind of like, that the war plan's been generated by the computer. It's 85,000 pages long, and 5 minutes after it starts, the plan goes out the window, and it's really, who knows what's going to happen here. It's anybody's guess, but it's going to happen sooner than later, because, as you said, there's an election coming up, right?
Yeah, and the scary thing is, even to a layman, to anyone really considering the situation, there's really no upside to this. We couldn't get any oil out of Iraq. We're certainly not going to get any out of Iran. So the only logical explanation is that, these, quote, elites are looking to create a world war to capitalize on. There's really nothing else I could think of that anyone could benefit from this way.
And they're defending the dollar, right?
Yeah, but the dollar's going to go out the window anyway. I mean, it's not like we're going to win the war. We didn't even win in Afghanistan, let alone Iraq, and we're certainly not going to win there. So, they've already made their agreements with China and Russia and India and all kinds of other places to sell oil not in dollars, including their bourse that opens, I think it's next month. to sell officially everything not in dollars. So it's not like we're going to change that.
Yeah,
So,
well, they've been their leadership's been kind of on a knife's edge. So maybe they're just hoping they can push them over the edge because, there was all those demonstrations, the grain movement. People are not happy there because they're pretty well-educated populace. They don't like being in this theocracy where they have no rights, where they have no freedom and no hope, basically. So just don't know when you throw that grenade down the well, you don't really know what's going to happen down the chimney pipe. Yeah. But it ain't going to be good.
And I suspect it will be in less than 9 months.
Yeah, no doubt, because, there's an election, right?
Mm-hmm.
How this could be good, I guess it's just you don't want to switch horses in the middle of a race. That's the argument that's always been used during wartime elections, and people usually go for it, with the exception, I guess, of LBJ, where he was, unceremoniously ushered out of D.C. So we'll have to see what... I just think...
And without being political, it's not like the Republicans have really put any stars up against him. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, talk about a bunch of backbenchers, and I don't talk about politics much because I don't believe it's going to make any difference unless it's Ron Paul, and I think the odds of Ron Paul are nil. Unless it's him, forget it. And I guess if they're expecting an economic collapse anyway, so they start a war instead... and that puts off the inevitable day of reckoning. I guess that's kind of what they're looking to do. Another thing that we constantly get questions about, and that I know you've written extensively about, is this concept of confiscation, which didn't really occur in the 30s. It theoretically occurred. Basically, the populace turned in about 500 tons of gold, but a lot of people kept their gold. And they weren't marching into people's houses. They did seal safe deposit boxes and such, but the actual confiscation wasn't quite as it's portrayed. But what about a repeat performance of that? I know gold has been demonetized. It's not a factor on the monetary scene as far as these elites are concerned. What's your feeling there, Andy?
Well, it's been both demonetized and demonized.
Yeah, I was going to say that, right.
Well, look, the reason, I write about this topic so much because I get more questions about that than practically anything. And Andy Schechtman and I just did a webinar a week ago, and we opened the floor to questions, and we had about, close to 100 questions, and I'd say a good third of them were about this topic. So we wrote several pieces last week just about that. And, one of them is just in general about confiscation. Look, they will do whatever they want to do, but the fact is, it just makes no sense at all. And the way I answered when someone asked was, I fear a lot of things in this world, but I have little to no fear of gold confiscation because, look, we're not on a gold standard anymore. So, and it's a global market, so there's really no practical reason for it. To do it. If the United States wanted to announce a decree that they're going to do it, I think the price of gold, if they announced it today, the price would probably go up 10 or 20 times overnight because they're basically saying we're validating that the gold is money and the dollar is not. And that would only, make things get worse. Not only that, there's very, very little gold owned by the civilians in the United States.
Sure.
Let alone that they're not going to be able to find 90% of it. But even if they found all of it, even if the U.S. government had all of its 8,135 tons of gold, that's only worth $400 billion. And, the debts are we could have 200 trillion of debt with the unfunded liabilities, and it's growing exponentially. So what would it matter? Look, there will be some kind of gold standard in the future, but we're far from that right now. And if they announced any kind of actions like gold confiscation, we'd probably already be so far down the rabbit hole of dollar depreciation and hyperinflation that, even if they did announce that, who on earth would not prefer to have physical gold and silver than to have worthless dollars?
Yeah, that would really set forth the stampede to get out of the dollar and to get metals. And it's interesting because I interviewed Jim Rickards last week, and he wrote that book, Currency Wars, and he's a consummate Washington insider. Let's face it, when something blows up in the financial system, they go to Jim because I don't know how he figured it out, but generally he might not come up with the best solution, but he comes up with a workable solution, like long-term capital, like the Iran hostage situation, so many different things this guy's had his thumb in. So I said, Jim, do we really have the gold? Is it there? And if we do have it, is it free of encumbrances? And he said, well, those are two separate questions. Number one, I believe we have it because there's no reason to believe that we don't have it. And I said, well, what about the Fed's refusal to allow an audit, or the Treasury's refusal? Because, hey, if you got it and it's there, let the world know, and you get rid of the speculation, you get rid of the conspiracy theories in one fell swoop. And he just said, well, he never really answered that. And then as far as it's encumbered, with lease outs and swaps and whatever, he basically said, push comes to shove, it's not going to matter, because if you look where the gold is kept, it's kept on military bases. And, that's really the ultimate point, is that when push comes to shove, the Army's got the gold, and it's the golden rule. And,
well, look, I mean, Jim Rickards is, I watch a lot of people in our shadow world, and he's really not in it. He's at the edge of it. He's kind of like a Bill Gross who he's in the past said completely anti-gold things, and now he's kind of moved right to the edge where he'll say some things. But, I've heard all he said. I've seen him speak in person, and, he's got some very interesting theories. But, when he talks about, I know they have it, he has no idea. Could they be encumbered? He has no idea about that. And yes, one of his theories is, well, if it's all here, like the German gold and all that, then we'll just take it, and they can say, screw them. But he has no idea what's here. And if he really believes that the Germans and the rest of the world, if we actually have their gold, or who knows if we do, are going to just sit back, like the Germans don't have allies, like, the Russians and the Chinese, who in a post-dollar world would have no problem, going to war over gold, as has happened through history. So he says some silly things to go along with the smart things. And of course, you're talking about some of the things he's been involved in, like, long-term credit management. I mean, that's like a child losing $1 compared to where we are now. And the Iran hostage crisis, which, by the way, was all started by the United States, compared to a potential nuclear war with the entire region, are, also things that no single man can figure. So, I watch him cautiously, because clearly he is an insider, as Bill Gross is. They clearly speak to some people who know some things. But, at the same time, part of him is outside, and I watch the part that's outside of the inside, that insider world.
Mm-hmm. Well, he is more or less saying that we're going to be on some kind of gold standard at some point. So maybe he's a little late to the party for that. But the book is interesting, and I think, he says some things that you have to think about, agree or disagree. And the most important thing that he said incrementally is that literally in the last, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, he's dramatically increased his bullishness about gold. And I mean, he used to just talk about it straggling the fence. Now he's coming out more than anyone else saying it's going to go to the moon. So, he also says there's going to be 99% windfall taxes and all that. But, that's also speculation, just like confiscation. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen. Yeah, of course, the government could say it's illegal to use as a 99% tax, but they would only do that if the system had already collapsed already. And by that point, the dollars will have collapsed, the gold will be worth infinite amounts, and there'll be all kinds of ways that people will figure out, to protect themselves. Yeah, I don't see the windfall profits tax thing really being practical because, like you say, at that point, systems collapsed, and the controls that they might have had in place before will not be. There'll be tons of barter and a lot of trading with metals, and they won't be able to do anything about it, because how are you going to establish cost? It's, I mean, they've just essentially, in some way, shape, or form, confiscated Iran's, exchange mechanism. And what has Iran done? They're now bartering with India for gold, and they're bartering with Australia for wheat.
and they've got all kinds of trade deals with Russia for rubles and China for yuan. I mean, people do what's necessity, and they certainly, are not going to do it when the government is telling them to literally give them the only thing they have that's worth something.
Yeah. Well, getting back to Iran, I think there's another shoe to drop there. That something. This is part of an orchestrated plan, which I think the last part is going to war. But all of this means what for gold, silver, and oil, right? It's kind of obvious, isn't it?
Well, there's no such thing as a gold negative headline. There's only great or bullish and super bullish and ultra bullish. And if they want to jack up oil prices, I can't think of anything more bullish. And, I firmly believe we're going to see new all-time highs for both gold and silver sometime later this year. And if, God forbid, anything starts Iran, we could see it immediately.
Oh, yeah, it'll be right away. I don't believe that they have the ability, as they claim, to close the Straits of Hormuz, but they could still wreak a lot of havoc around the world, and it ain't going to be good. That's for sure. Not going to be good. So anyway, Ant, I guess we'll catch you next week. For the folks out there, if you want to get in touch with Andy, where do they find you?
milesfranklin.com.
All right, and make sure you subscribe to his daily rant, because it's a must. All right, so till next week, Ant.
Thanks very much, Gary.